Unicorn Overlord is not as good as Fire Emblem Engage. Is it bad? No, not by a long shot. But to say I'm disappointed in the product is kind of an understatement. I was expecting something grand, something epic, something that like really blew my expectations away. I was expecting a lot of really good, like really nuanced character writing. I was expecting gorgeous visuals. I was expecting like really in-depth strategic gameplay. I got something that was a cheap knockoff of a Fire Emblem game, something that plays like a worse ogre battle, and just all in all, just just bored me by the end. Like I'm not even like all the way through Prosterios yet. I still have to go through Albion, and I suppose I have to go through like the end game. But like it's weird looking at the game now, seeing my unit, seeing how like enthusiastic I was about the game, like to start off with, and just seeing that like yeah, this is not as good as Fire Emblem. And I suppose this is the critical moment in Fire Emblem's history where this game, coming from like critically acclaimed developer Vanillaware, a lot of people will say they put out the best niche games in the industry, who have like their gorgeous like 2D or trademark 2D artwork, who are like hyped up, they are one of those studios, right? These huge critical darlings that put out like nothing but like the most highly specialized niche products that just win people over by their sheer charm and creativity and just like the most gorgeous 2D anime artwork you'll ever see. Yeah, Fire Emblem Engage was better. Okay, like it had better visuals, it had better plot, it had better gameplay, better characters, more things to do. Like Engage was simply better in general, right? And right now we're kind of in this weird denial phase, I think, because acknowledging that like intelligent systems is able to put out better strategy games every 3 years, right? Than Vanillaware can in like 10, right? It took 10 years for them to develop a Unicorn Overlord. Like that really just gives a shocking just it really is shocking that like this Unicorn Overlord is the closest thing we've ever gotten to a proper FE clone, and it didn't even come close to FE's quality. Like not even close. It doesn't even scratch it, honestly. Like if this came out like around the same time as a proper FE release, it would have gotten like absolutely stomped. Okay, right now we're kind of in a weird position because like Engage wasn't super popular, and we we don't have any new Fire Emblem products in the horizon. We're probably not going to get one until like 2026. Like I would say, um, like it's going to be a while before we get a new Fire Emblem game. So like Unicorn Overlord was great for people who are just like, oh yeah, I want something a little bit different. I want to play something like Fire Emblem, but like yeah, like the reality is it's not as good, right? The reality is like this game, from Vanillaware doesn't even come close to what FE is able to accomplish, right? And I can pretty much guarantee you that the next FE game is going to be better than this as well. But like, I really want to like kind of emphasize at this stage like what that means, right? Fire Emblem dominates the strategy RPG niche, right? It made this stuff mainstream. It made it popular. It gave it an audience. It's the reason Unicorn Overlord exists more than likely, right? This stuff, it is the premier franchise in this genre, right? In this niche. And right now, like for the past several years since Awakening came out, I think like that's been true. But much like with Breath of the Wild, and people kind of refusing to acknowledge that Breath of the Wild is the premier open world fantasy RPG game, right? People are kind of doing the same thing with Fire Emblem, right? Where they don't want to acknowledge that Fire Emblem is more popular, more successful, more relevant than any of its contemporaries, right? Like I acknowledged this last year, right, when a Fire Emblem Engage came out, and people were trying to say that like, oh, it only sold 1.8 million units, it bombed. Like completely unaware of just like what the budget for these games actually are, how well these games typically sell, like what the typical range is. Like the typical thought process when talking about Fire Emblem Engage's sales was that like Three Houses did 4 million units. Like right? Like completely failing to acknowledge the fact that like Three Houses was uncommonly successful, right? It had a lot of things going for it. It had like a Smash tie-in. It was like the first Fire Emblem game on Switch. It was hugely popular because of some of the decisions they made. Like, there's no denying that like Three Houses was a big deal, right? But people don't understand what that actually means, right? Like, sometimes when you have such a big hit like that, it's really difficult to follow up on it with a successful new entry. And like Engage tried, it did things differently. It rethought the formula. It reinvented itself. It's better in some ways, right? But at the end of the day, it didn't sell as well. And that's not really a problem, right? Like in and of itself, because they still maintain the reach those all-time heights to begin with, right? Three Houses and Engage like exist in the same franchise, right? They are building off each other. They are like expanding the universe and the lore and like there's just like the appeal of the franchise, right? Fire Emblem is going to continue growing and evolving from here. Like, it's possible, I think, that eventually we might start seeing these games sell like 10 million units, right? Like, I can see this like this series becoming more and more popular as more and more people start to acknowledge this is like the best JRPG franchise on the planet right now. But like right now, we're kind of in this weird period, much like we were with Zelda, right? Where people don't want to admit that Fire Emblem is as popular as it is purely because it's a Nintendo IP. That's the only reason why. It's the only reason people are like negative towards this franchise at all. It's the reason why so many people do hit pieces on it and try to claim it's censored or that like the games aren't as good as they used to be or whatever. It's purely because it's a Nintendo IP, right? It is trying to downplay the longevity and relevancy of this Nintendo franchise, right? That's the only reason. It has nothing to do with like the changes they made or what the games are actually like. If anything, the games have only gotten better over the past decade. But will you see people acknowledge that? No. Right? Instead, you get this weird, like, nonsense conspiracy that, like, these games are, they're appealing to normie audiences, not the real fans. Never mind that, like, normies are, like, the people coming out and buying these games and playing them and enjoying them, while, like, the real fans just, like, pirate everything and complain about, like, I don't know, like localization or whatever, something that like nobody actually cares about. Like Fire Emblem is in an interesting place right now, where it is undeniably the biggest franchise of its genre on the planet. But we're still seeing people like try to dispute that. We're still seeing people in denial about it, right? Like, and this extends to a lot of other Nintendo properties. Like, Metroid is the most popular Metroid-like franchise on the planet, right? Because it established the genre. It remains the most popular. Like, people still play Super, and like to this day, it's a huge deal, right? But you saw a lot of people like try to say that like, oh, Symphony of the Night is better, Hollow Knight is better, like La Muluna is better. Like, you'll see people like throw out everything under the sun to try to disregard Metroid. Like, I've seen people try and say that like all the real Metroid likes are on PC, which is like laughable because like there's absolutely nothing on PC that's as good as Metroid. Like, not even Hollow Knight, right? It's not even close. But like you're still seeing people like in denial about that. You're still seeing people in denial about the popularity of Splatoon or the popularity of 2D Mario, right? Like, how many people like tried to write off Mario Wonder as not a major release, like when it came out on the Switch in 2023, only to become like one of the best-selling titles in the year and completely demolish Spider-Man, right? Like, which a lot of people thought was going to be a major hit, right? Like, the narrative that like Nintendo games are like failing or are irrelevant or aren't competitive just isn't going to stick. Like, and it hasn't stuck, but like you're still seeing these people desperately trying to downplay all these games, right? And with Fire Emblem, I do think this is it's very obvious with this particular franchise, right? Where Unicorn Overlord is like clearly, objectively not as good as a Fire Emblem game, and yet you're going to see a lot of people try to say that like Unicorn Overlord is like way better than it'll be interesting seeing like what the narrative becomes, but it's not going to be something that sticks, and I do think that's like the important thing. Like Three Houses has already established itself as a far more popular, interesting, engaging, original strategy RPG than Unicorn Overlord ever will.